behalf of Volt and our company, Mental Mastery, today we're talking about mental momentum, this idea of the mind-body connection and what we call riding the flywheel and avoiding the doom loop. What I want to do to get started here, the body is designed to move, and so is the brain. So it's where optimal performance is when we move our body to engage our brains. What I'm going to have you do is wherever you are, I'm going to have you stand up. So if you're standing up, you're in a room where you can get up and you have space, go ahead and stand up. So what I want you to do is just want you to shake out your shoulders, roll your neck out, especially if you've been sitting down all day long. If you work from home like me, I want you to just do a quick body scan. Imagine there's like a light that's kind of scanning you all the way down your body. Feel your feet if they're in their shoes or if you're barefoot, really get anchored down into the ground. And then what I want you to do is I want you to do in through your nose, out through your mouth, 3 good breaths. At least 3 to 4 seconds in. Okay, now we're going to be going through an exercise here too that's going to demonstrate the connection between the mind and the body. Here's what we're going to do first. So wherever you are, assuming you don't have any musculoskeletal injuries, what I want you to do is pick one leg, shift to that one leg, and I want you to balance on that one leg. Lift the other leg up, just balance. Do that for another few seconds. Okay, put your foot down. Now what I want you to do is you can use the same leg or you can shift to another leg, balance on one leg, and while you're doing that, I'm going to have you rub your stomach. Rub your stomach. Doesn't matter which direction it is. It'll be counterclockwise, it's going to be clockwise. Go ahead and stop. We're going to add to this. I want you to balance on one leg. Go ahead and balance, rub your stomach, and I'm going to have you tap your head. Go ahead and stop. We're going to do the same thing over again, but this time I'm going to add something too. So let's go ahead and do that. Shift to the next leg. Balancing. I'm rubbing my tummy. Now I want you to give yourself some positive self-talk out loud. And you can say it out loud. Say, I've got this. I've got this. Mary, what you got?
I've got this.
I've got this. I've got the. Okay, down. Now we're going to do the same thing. Balance on one leg, rub my tummy, pat my head. Now I want you to say, I suck. I suck. I suck. I suck. All right, now you go through that quick exercise. Whatever went through your mind, everybody had a different experience, right? We all did the same things, but we all had a slightly different experience. We're going to bring that to life, and that's going to be our practical example. So the context of what we went about, we're going to get into the so and now here in a little bit too. But first, I want to find out about you guys. So if you don't know already, in the chat feature, Chloe's put up here a link to an interactive poll system called Mentimeter. The first question is, what city and state are you calling from? I want to get to know you guys and where you're at. All right, Cheyenne, Wyoming, San Marcos, fantastic, San Clemente, Hanover, New Hampshire. Okay, Issaquah, Washington, awesome. El Paso, Texas. All right, here we go, Texas. Salem, Oregon. Johnson City, Tennessee. I think I know who that is. Chris Gingrich. What's up, man? Torrance, California. Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. All right. We got good representation almost from every time zone. Palo Alto, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Okay. Oh, we got Australia. Fantastic. All right. Wherever you're calling in from, again, I want to say thank you for giving us your time. This is an awesome series that Volt has put together. We're excited to be on here for the first time to really talk about this idea of mental fitness and psychological momentum. On behalf of my partner for Mental Mastery, Nate Last, who's in Salt Lake City, again, he had an emergency come up here at the last minute. He sends his regrets. I just want to tell you guys a little bit about myself. So I'm originally from California. I went to West Point to play football for Army. That's where I found out about this idea of mental skills training. Really served me well as I deployed to Iraq, Afghanistan, the next 20 years, and really realized that combat is a thinking person's game. But like a lot of people, I knew how to bring that skill set into myself. I didn't know how to teach it to my soldiers. And that sent me on this next odyssey over the last 15 years where I got a chance to teach back at West Point, the Air Force Academy, most recently it's Texas A&M. And as I retired from the Army, I went out and worked in Major League Baseball for a few years, done some consulting with the NFL. I spent 5 years with 2 different special forces units. So I've worked with all these elite populations. And one of the things that makes those populations unique, elite performers and teams, is they train their brains like they train their bodies, their team, their character, and their craft. And the thing about that is it's not mainstream. And so for Volt and for ourselves, we want to democratize mental skills training. We want to get in the hands of you who are out there. If you're a coach, if you're a leader, if you're an individual athlete or performer, we want to get this skill set out there so you can deliberately and intentionally train your brain. We're using the what, so what, now what format, adult learning. But before we go any further, let's go back to Mentimeter here for a minute. And then I want you to go to the next question. And I want to hear what your intentions are. So now that we said hello, what are your intentions? What do you want to get out of today? So looks like we got focus, add another tool to my toolbox, add to what I've learned in mental management courses, get some new information, how to control emotions during competition, and just how to generally get mentally stronger. Is any others?
I'll just read it to you. I'll just read it to you from the chat. Trying to learn one thing that I can give to the kids to make them handle their emotions better.
Okay, fantastic. Well, let's keep a hold of that, and at the end, let's do a quick check on learning to make sure that we met at least some or most of those intentions today too. So there really are 4 big things that we want to get out of today. One, I want to talk about some of the challenges and opportunities that you're up against as performers, coaches, leaders, parents. Talk about what mental skills training is and what mental performance is, how this idea of psychological momentum works, and then what you can do to be able to ride the flywheel and avoid the doom loop. All of you are in this idea of what we call in the arena. I'm a big Teddy Roosevelt fan, and he had this famous speech called the man in the arena, but really it's about the person in the arena. And this idea, the metaphor is the arena is where you're performing. And generally speaking, the people that I work with are either outside the performance arena trying to get in, they're in the stands trying to get down to the ground to get the opportunity to be able to perform, or they're trying to be able to execute tasks that matter at the upper range of their potential. And that's you guys. You're in the performance arena, whether it's sports, whether it's through training, physical therapy, athletic training, business, life, right? You guys are in the arena, right? And you need a trusted guide at your side to be able to help you with that. And that's what we're here to do. You deserve a few fundamental things as human beings. We believe that you deserve to become the best version of yourself. That's that transcendence piece, if you're familiar with that. We deserve that you need to be something part of bigger than yourself. That's why a lot of people play sports and do what they do. Feel like your team is invested in you. That's something we see is very common right now in terms of when it comes to the quiet quitting thing that's going on. We also believe that you deserve to bring your whole self to work and school. And that one of the things that's interesting in work culture and athletics, military, law enforcement, there isn't this separation between work and life balance. There's just one version of you, and you deserve to bring your best version of yourself to work every single day. And that's that same person who goes home. So that's what we believe that you deserve. And you have a choice every single day. At Mental Mastery, we say that challenge, change, and adversity, that's inevitable. And the pandemic really showed that. And this picture that I have here really represents to some of my clients who work in the San Francisco Bay Area, not too far from where I'm from. This was when there was incredible lockdown going on, and the wildfires were spreading, burning in most of California. That seems like it's every year now. And there was this fog, and it looked like the apocalypse. So when I asked my clients who were in the Bay Area during this time, the low point during the pandemic, this is what they described what challenge, change, and adversity looked like in terms of their low point. But the choice that you have and what choice that we all have in this idea called agency is that growth, both personally and professionally, that's optional. And that's a choice that you make every moment of every single day.
Sorry, real quick. Are you meaning to share anything from your screen?
Oh yeah. Am I, you guys see this? Okay.
Not yet.
Okay. All right. Thank you for telling me that. I want to show you because that's a pretty cool picture. So the choices that you have, challenge, change, and adversity, growth is optional there too. In order for you to be able to make that choice and to be able to be your best more often, it's this idea about training like an athlete. And even if you're not an athlete here on the call, the way that this whole person approach works is that you have the ability and the willingness to be able to train your mind, which includes the cognitive portion, how you think, how you feel, which is what we're focusing on today. You can train your body, which in this case fundamentally includes your recovery. That's your movement, that's your nutrition. You can train your team, which is obviously training our interpersonal trust and rapport and how we come together towards common goals. You can train your character, which we define as your purpose, your values, your beliefs that are essential to your identity to help you with your moral and ethical decision-making within your performance context. And then your craft. And that's the X's and O's, that's the strategy, that's the tactics. What 1 or 2 areas do you think get most of people's attention most of the time? So if we're training this whole person approach, what do you think gets most of the attention?
Body and craft.
Body and craft. Okay, cool. Why?
Because everyone's in the gym all the time and everyone really cares about how they look and how their work is.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Sarah knows, it's this whole Peter Drucker principle. He's one of the fathers of modern management. It's this whole idea that what gets measured gets managed, right? When I could tangibly see results and I can measure that, then I tend to focus in on that, right? The third one is probably team, especially coaches and leaders tend to focus in on their teams, spend a lot of time working on that. But we don't really know even what character is. And we don't really, this is all the intangible stuff up here. That's kind of that soft, ooey gooey stuff. So we tend not to focus in on that as well, too. But what's interesting is when I talk to athletes and performers, leaders, coaches, when you ask them, there's only 100% of who you are as a performer and 100% who you are as a team when it comes to your performance. Give me a percentage of importance when we're just comparing the mind and the body. Let's just take the mind and the body. Inevitably, it's somewhere between 60 to 90% importance on the mind. When then I ask them another question, okay, how much of your time and energy do you spend on training your mind versus training your body? And then that's completely inverse usually. They spend more time training their body than they train their mind. And the reason why that is because it's a lot of people don't know how. They don't have the language, the lexicon, the process of what goes into that. And a lot of people just don't have the available resources with them as well, too, which is something that at Volt and Mental Mastery, we're trying to change, again, to democratize and operationalize and get out there to you all what this is, because it's not just for the elite populations or executives. This is really for everybody. And the earlier we get it in the hands of our young people, the more likely they are to be resilient when they hit inevitable setback, and they can perform at the upper range of their potential more often. And as we say, you don't have to be sick to get better. And psychology falls under a spectrum of you're dealing with psychological illness and injury, that you think of therapists and going to see counselors on the prevention side. But there's the performance side, and it's this idea of the mental strength for your brain. So think of Nate and myself as the mental strength and conditioning coaches for your brain. What I like to hear too is, and I like to hear from you too, we're going to go to the poll again. The next question is, when you think of mental training, what are the first words that come to mind? Anybody want to take themselves off mute?
Focus.
Focus. Okay. That's a big one there. I'm going to show the screen here. Big one's focus. Absolutely. I hear concentration, lasting habits, self-improvement, imagery. Okay, great. Practice, cognitive agility. Interesting. Okay. When you say cognitive agility, what do you mean? The person who shared that, if you don't mind.
Being able to, have the agility to pivot and move from one area of focus to another, or one dilemma to another, or one context to another, while still utilizing some of the same underlying principles. So I don't have to learn something new for every situation I walk into.
Love it.
Rewiring of your brain.
Okay. Rewiring your brain. Okay. Awesome. It's that idea of neuroplasticity that allows our brain has the ability to be able to shape. It's moldable. It's malleable over the course of in terms of our ability to learn over the course of our lifetime. Very cool. So let's get into some definitions here. There's some, you can nerd out here a little bit too in the section here in white, but I really want you guys to focus in on is what mental performance is. Again, I talked about that psychology spectrum, right? The psychology, this idea of looking at people who had psychological illness and injury, like anxiety, depression, that leads to unfortunate outcomes like suicide, suicidal ideation, depression, so on and so forth, right? In the middle, you've got the prevention model. Think of those as the athletic trainers, the physical therapists for the brain. And then you have the upper band here, which is performing and executing tasks, right? In order to perform at an optimal level, what mental performance is getting the most out of what you have to be at your best when it matters the most. Why is mental performance so important? Well, a lot of this comes from the mental toughness research that I teach in my practice. And Nate and I have a combined practice, but in my practice, I teach the 4 C's of mental toughness, and we use different psychometrics for that, include the mental toughness questionnaires. That this idea of mental performance is actually one of the most comprehensive, well-researched topics that is out there. Some of the studies suggest it can account for up to 25% increase in athletic performance, and that's huge. Mental performance is also shown to improve workforce development, so it can improve mental health. Although we're working on this mental fitness and performance end of the spectrum, it does have implications in terms of mental health in the workforce, which is getting a lot of attention in the post-pandemic area. It can affect teamwork, task cohesion, social cohesion. It affects the ability to be able to influence others from a leadership perspective. It impacts the culture or the collective values and beliefs that an organization has. That's part of their identity. And also, like Brian talked about, it helps us with our agility and be able to adapt and overcome challenge, change, and adversity over time. The bottom line here is that, hey, this mental performance is a big deal and has a lot of implications. And the way that you develop that is through mental skills. And a lot of people think that, when it comes to mental performance or mental toughness, this idea is that, if we were all scaled in terms of control, commitment, challenge, and confidence, those are the 4 C's of mental toughness. We all fall under a scale of 1 to 10 in each one of those factors, right? And a lot of people would say, okay, well, my goal coming in to work with you or to work with my athletes is to make my team or my athletes mentally tougher. So we think about moving the needle to the right. When the reality is that we don't all want to be 10s out of 10 on mental toughness when it comes to confidence despite setbacks, challenge and risk orientation, our commitment and motivation towards our goals, and our confidence in ourselves and our ability to be able to build trust with others. And we actually don't want to be completely mentally sensitive either. We want to be somewhere in the middle, depending on the situation and the context. What I say, it's not about necessarily being mentally tough all the time or mentally sensitive all the time either. It's about being a better thermostat. And this comes from this idea of emotional intelligence competencies. So you think of really high-performing individuals, high-performing leaders and teams, they have a shared thermostat, right? That starts in the individual, the inside out. And that starts with awareness of themselves in terms of how they think, how they feel, how they behave, which is a big focus for today. They're also aware of their environment, which is something that Brian Marion talks about, Arcadia Cognerati. They talk about situational awareness within the environment and within the context of others, how they impact us, how we impact others. That's the outer awareness. And then we have the ability, where we bring in the control piece is the ability to self-regulate or self-manage, right? And those buttons here are what I call the A-B button. We can control our attitudes and our behavior. And then if we're able to do that, then we're able to better influence others. So we can influence other people, we can influence our environment, and vice versa. So it's an inside out and outside in approach to this. So it's all about becoming the better thermostat. And that starts with self-awareness, which is what today's about. Let's talk about how momentum works. How many of you guys raise your hand have heard of psychological momentum, like when the course of like a team sport, like football, soccer, or rugby? So when you think about, Tara, if you don't mind, do you mind taking yourself on mute? When you hear about that momentum from a team concept, when you're watching a team sport, what's that all about?
It's sort of like an energy as everybody is picking up or declining in their energy collectively. You can move each other forward in your performance.
Right.
And conversely, you can, hold each other back. So it's just sort of, a building of energy, I would say.
Yeah, that's a great way of talking about too. Yeah. Scott, if you don't mind taking yourself off mute too. So when you think of momentum from a collective team or group concept, what does that look like from your perspective?
Kind of everybody just jiving and gelling really well together.
Yeah. Yeah. We also think of like sudden changes, right? There's these different situations that happen over the course of a game from an athletic standpoint, but actually in working at home, if you talk about, hey, that when bad things happen, it's like, oh, they come in threes, right? So what ends up happening there is like you're anticipating, you end up having this self-fulfilling prophecy that bad things are going to happen, right? And so that sudden change leads to this expectation that something good or something bad is going to happen as a result of what just happened in the past, usually, right? How this works is this idea that the most important 6 inches, in any of our performance arenas is between our ears. But that starts with this situation. And I call that the story which we tell ourselves, especially from a retrospective standpoint. As we're looking back at our performance in the past, it passes as prologue to the future. We're talking about what happened to us when something good or something bad happened. The situation sets the tone for the story that we tell ourselves and others. So that consists at a very basic level, the who, what, when, and the where. The next thing that happens is this idea about a thought. Now, there's 2 types of thinking. There's conscious and subconscious. And I want you to think about thinking like a river. The majority of our thinking that we're aware of is on the surface level. It's probably about 10% of our conscious thinking that we're aware of is happening that's within our control. The rest of the 90% of our thinking is in the subconscious. We don't really have control over that. We can influence that. But I'm talking about your conscious surface level thoughts in terms of that flow of the river of thoughts that are constantly going on 24/7, 365. And then you have that thought, which often happens when the sun changes. Oh, crap. Then we talk about the emotional and physiological response. Now, this is where we really hear about that fight, flight, or freeze thing that's happening. That's very common lexicon now too. So when I'm talking about feelings, I'm talking about emotions. So like happy, sad, glad, anger, frustration, and then your physiological response. So for examples like cotton mouth, butterflies in your stomach. What are some of your guys' physiological responses when you're about, you feel nerves and you're about to go do something really important?
Oh, I sweat.
You do? Okay. Gotcha. Okay.
Isn't that delightful? But yes, start
No,
sweating.
that's completely normal. I guess normal is a cycle on a washing machine, but that is very common. Sweaty, especially sweaty palms. Anybody else? What are some of the other physiological responses?
Increased heart rate.
Increased heart rate. Absolutely. What about we worked on our breathing too, speaking of heart rate too. What happens to our breathing, generally speaking?
It's faster and often shallow.
Yeah, it starts to get shallow. It's a little higher up in our chest. You see your shoulders moving up and down, right? We're not really breathing diaphragmatically, which we do kind of in a rest and recovery state too. So now our body is really getting ourselves, now we're getting our brain is getting our body ready to do something really important, which then manifests. And why I have that animated is because it's drawing your attention to that, because the majority of people, because what we see on the surface level is the behavior of what we do or don't do. What would be an example of a behavior and action in terms of what I do or don't do? It can be any behavior.
Fidgeting with your hands.
Yep. Fidgeting with your hands, like pacing. You ever see people jump up and down? Some people, they like to get real big as the confidence builder. That's a positive thing, right? Anybody ever feel like numbness until right before you do that, right? And that's that pregame jitters of what happens too. And all this happens, which affects what a performance is, which we really don't control. But that's that synthesis between the behavior and then the outcome. That's where performance lies right there too. And once it ends up happening, generally speaking, is now the loop repeats itself. A couple things I want to point out to before we get into the practical example is that this is not a linear process. Oftentimes, we can have a physiological response to like an activating event, a stressor. Like if you've ever been scared and jumped while you're watching a scary movie, or someone has startled you, or you heard a loud bang. These are all the things that lead to an immediate feeling and reaction before you even consciously think about it, right? Because the way that your brain, your body is designed is to really bypass, to go really quick. So the point of entry of where this happens, whenever there's a situation, it could lead right to a behavior. It could lead slowly to a thought, could go right to an emotion, and it could zigzag around here, right? But ultimately it impacts your performance. When things are going well and in your favor, in terms of mental momentum, that's called cycling up. That's when it's like the flywheel effect, right? That's what we call that, the flywheel. That comes from Jim Collins' work and Good to Great. If you're not familiar with it, we stole it from him shamelessly. We give him credit for it. Okay, but the psychological momentum in your favor is called cycling up. And then the opposite happens when you start to spiral down, when we call it flushing yourself down the toilet. And that's called the doom loop. And so the key piece here is in recognizing what you control when you're riding the flywheel, getting out of your own way. And when you're starting to spiral downward into the doom loop, what can you do to then reverse the momentum? And we're going to get into some practical examples using our case study up front with the silly exercise that I had you go through. But there are only two things in this cycle here that you can control. What are the two things that you can control?
Your behavior and attitude.
There you go, Bill. You can control your behaviors. You can control your conscious attitudes, right? With about 10% of the equation. Again, this is the A and the B button in the thermostat. You're absolutely correct too. So what I like to do is I'm pulling up the my digital whiteboard here. What I'd like to do is I want to have two volunteers. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about the flywheel. And then we're going to talk about the doom loop using the example that we went through together. So let's talk about, so who we got any brave volunteers? Go ahead. So what was the situation?
So I guess I'll do a personal example that actually happened a couple weeks ago that my boss had to pull me into his office. It was a soldier that has been non-compliant with rehab. And I basically told him to his face, if he didn't care about his well-being, wasn't going to care. And he has a history of being non-compliant with another coworker of mine.
Okay. So what was going through? So, were you talking about the confrontation with the soldier or with your boss?
The soldier. It wasn't really a confrontation.
Maybe we just call it an engagement.
Yeah.
Does that work? So when you were having this engagement, this back and forth with this soldier, what was going through your head? What were your thoughts?
I didn't really trust what he had to say because of his history of being non-compliant. And I just really didn't want to waste my time on a patient that wasn't going to do what I asked him to do.
Okay. Anything else?
Just kind of annoyed, I guess.
Okay. Hold that thought. That's that you were feeling annoyed, right?
Mm-hmm.
What else? What other feelings were you having?
Frustrated.
Frustrated. Okay. What was that physiological response that was happening?
Do you know when you're having a conversation and your blood's starting to boil because nothing you're saying is getting through to him?
Absolutely. I think we've all been there. some capacity. Yeah. That's where that term comes, right? It feels like your blood's boiling because your temperature is rising, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, okay, blood boiling. And then how did that affect your behavior in terms of how your body language and how you maybe treated him? If there was a camera that could see you in that moment, what would that look like?
I was very closed off. I was not where I needed to act as a healthcare provider because we have to treat soldiers for symptoms. Our personal feelings are not relevant. We have to take what they say is truth. Yeah. And I think it was my behavior was, I wouldn't say unprofessional, but I knew better and I should have not done it.
Okay. Gotcha. So you immediately were kind of thinking over here, maybe a regret. Yeah,
maybe a little bit of regret, but also I was letting a lot of outside factors impact the conversation.
And what was his reaction as a result of that?
Well, he was very upset when I did not give him a profile because that's what he came in for.
Okay. So he's upset.
And I didn't know it was an issue, and I scheduled him for rehab, and then he went back upstairs after I had sent him hey, do these exercises, whatever. And the soldier went upstairs to my boss and told him that he didn't want to see me anymore. Because I didn't give the soldier what he wanted.
Okay.
So it's kind of a weird situation, but I'm kind of struggling with this interaction and how to learn from it, which is why I'm kind of being very vulnerable talking about this with a bunch of strangers that don't know me.
No, I mean, I love this because we've all been there, Sarah, right? And I thank you for being vulnerable because I think this is a great example. How would you, looking back, right? It's hindsight's 2020. How would you evaluate your performance?
I would definitely give myself a C- because I did my due diligence through the evaluation. I'd seen the soldier prior.
Right.
I even had another coworker of mine get involved, and it's just, I wasn't in a good headspace, and that impacted my interaction with the soldier.
Bingo.
So the negative piece.
Yep. So the negative thinking, it seems like that this is where it started for you.
Yeah.
And your perception towards him based on his past behaviors, right? Do you think that started before you even interacted with him? Do you think that negative thinking started before you even engaged with him?
Yeah. I had a friend pull me aside a couple weeks ago and tell her that, hey, you're in a really, really negative headspace.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
This happened right before my friend did that.
Yeah, that's great. So what jumps out to you? So Sarah, thank you again for walking through this too. Again, the doom loop effect that could happen here, right? But there's also the opposite of this. There's a flywheel effect that happens too, right? And you could see that if you just change a few variables, how you can you're riding the flywheel instead of reversing the doom loop just by toggling your attitudes and behaviors. But what's interesting about this, Sarah, how long does this take? This is probably what do you think?
So evals for us at H2F this was a course of 45 minutes that all this went on. Okay.
But the thought, when the thought came into your head, how long did that take between the time he showed up to the time you had that thought? What do you think that happened?
Probably about a minute or two, if we're going to be honest.
Yeah, a minute or two, right? And that initiated that doom loop to probably go downwards, right? In terms of it spiraled, right? Now, was it catastrophic? No, right? But it was still something where it's you talked about it. You need, when you're in the moment, your blood's boiling. When you have that moment of clarity, I immediately regret this, right? It's kind of oh crap, right? So again, back to the audience. What are your thoughts on this in terms of what could she do better next time? Let's help Sarah learn from this.
Hey, Andy, I got a thought on this. And
go for it.
Sarah, thanks for sharing that and being vulnerable. Appreciate that. I was thinking back to your mental competencies, and the first one was self-awareness. And I think that's such a critical aspect of it. Just know what you bring to that table and how you might respond to a situation of non-compliance, and just kind of preload that information into your headspace before you have that meeting.
Yeah, I love that. So the almost having the anticipation awareness, or towards okay, here comes this soldier again that's non-compliant. Oh God, here we go. You're almost recognizing something that's going to happen before it happens, right? And again, it's easier said than done, right? But it's just recognizing the fact that when I'm in these situations, when I'm dealing with difficult people, I have a tendency to be, to not really treat them the way that I should treat them. right? And again, is it being perfect all the time? Heck no, because we're going to screw this up, right? This is an experimentation, right? But if, again, we're trying to tip the odds in our favor that we're going to ride the flywheel more often. And then eventually the reason why this is the doom loop is that you have a choice, right? You have a choice to reverse that. And you can actually see it. And sometimes people are able to do this is that when you're actually in the moment, I certainly have had these moments where I've been in a heated argument, in my time in the military, and I almost had this moment of clarity where I pushed back and I started laughing, and I called the timeout. I said, hey, can we just stop for a minute too? And depending on the relationship, now you don't want to laugh in somebody's face when you're having a heated argument, right? But that was a good example. I remember clearly later on in my career when I had the benefit of, messing this up a lot, is that, hey, this is ridiculous, right? Can we press pause here for a second and then start to reverse the momentum here into our collective favor? So that's a great example. Anybody got any other thoughts before we go into a little bit of reflection here?
I think just noticing your behavior. So just that you're feeling, that you kind of maybe even stood a bit more like the whole closed off thing. Like if you maybe like tensed up or something, if you're noticing like somatically how you're feeling during that time, that could maybe be like, oh, okay, I need to take a breath. I need,
Yeah, that's a great point to choose. The somatic piece is really what's going on inside your body, or like kind of going into your body, recognizing. So from this example, like, hey, my blood is starting to boil, right? So if you know what your physiological responses are, your body is kind of giving those indicators to you before you respond, right? So again, those are kind of like the check engine light that's happening that we tend to ignore when we're riding our car, which is why we don't do preventative maintenance, right? We usually just take our car when it's, the wheels are falling off and the engine's ready to explode, right? But our body is giving us these little check engine lights that allow us to prevent the mistake from happening with our behaviors, right? Great comment, Mary. So what I'd like to do here is I'm going to stop this here. I'm going to bring this back up. What I'd like to do is spend the next 5 minutes. So that was a great example of the doom loop in action. Let's ride the flywheel together, right? So what I want you to do is I want you guys to think back. You can go back to the example that we did ahead of time if you want to keep it simple and not personal. But I'd like to do is, I want you guys to reflect on a time when you were masterful, when you were in the zone, you were in a flow state, you could do no wrong. There was great outcomes. You performed at your very best or at the upper range of your potential, and map this out. Go back, think about the camera that could look at that situation of that story. Who was involved? What were you doing? What were the outcomes? When did it happen? Where was it? Start to get that imagery, that picture where it was, and then think about what was going through your head. Based on what you remember, what did you say to yourself in that moment? Maybe you didn't think anything. As a result of your thinking or lack of thinking, what were your emotions and physiological reaction to that? And then what did that cause you to do or not do that led to an optimal outcome? And if you want to continue that, then how did that momentum continue around here to this self-fulfilling prophecy? And if you get through your flywheel example, then go ahead and sketch out a doom loop. What would that look like? And then do that comparative analysis. Anybody want to share? Looking for some flywheel examples here.
I guess I can share mine.
Yeah, go for it, Mary. Thank you.
This past weekend, so that was pretty cool. But it was a half marathon, and it was the longest I've run since I got really pretty badly injured this past summer. And so so this was just a race, but it was my thoughts were that I kind of just went into it with I just want to finish. And it was one of those like, this isn't gonna be my best time ever, but let me just try to finish this race. And it'll be my PR for the year since it's my first race this year. So it's, one of those kind of things. I just went in with kind of no really high expectations, no expectations at all. Just, I want to have fun. I don't want to get injured. Like, let's just do this. And I was really grateful to be running again. And I just really felt a lot of joy, a lot of gratitude. And I think that having that mindset, I felt like people said I was smiling, like because they were passing me the other way at the turnaround. And they're just like, oh, you're, I was like, that's so great that you're smiling. So I think that really helped me to feel, if I can read my own writing, that I breathe better for sure.
Yep, for sure. Yep.
Too far out of breath. I perceived effort was a lot lower than it actually was. Like I was looking at my Garmin after, like, wow, like I really felt like it wasn't that hard. And then also I could hear like friends and people who have kind of coached me over the years in my head while I was running.
That's happening over here.
And I felt more consistent. than they had been before, where I would like run really fast and then have to kind of stop and walk. So outcomes were, it was my PR for half marathon, which was really, it wasn't that fast, but it was good for me. And it was really enjoyable. So
fantastic. That's such a great example. What changed? So we, I'm not comparing two different situations, that type of thing too, right? We got an individual PR with the marathon, and we have Sarah's interaction with, a difficult customer or patient in this case, who happens to be a soldier, right? What's the big difference between the two, do you guys think?
What you tell yourself.
100%. And that's the thing about how we think, right? There's positive, negative, and neutral thinking, right? And we know that negative thinking dominates our patterns of thinking, right? And it's not a bad thing. It's how we're designed to keep us alive, but it's not congruent with what we're up against today, right? Positive thinking and blowing smoke up our behinds and, in terms of unicorns and rainbows and positive mental thinking isn't always helpful either, right? That's where neutral thinking comes in, where I can look at things, accept them what they were, look at things objectively as possible, and then take that next best step towards a small victory. So if I'm in the doom loop, I want to be able to shift my self-talk and how I think from negative to neutral. That's the key, right? Then now once I start cycling up, now I can go from neutral to positive, right? But first I want to get to neutral, right? The other piece was the behaviors, right? What's the difference in the behaviors that she had as a result, and the feelings that resulted in those behaviors?
Instead of having a behavior and an emotion that was a negative response and escalating towards almost like paralysis from frustration, you had the complete opposite, which was like this lightning of perceived exertion as a result of those positive thoughts.
Yep, exactly. So, that thinking led to, and it's really hard to have the distress, the negative reaction to that cortisol when you have feelings of gratitude. And the research supports that, right? Her thoughts immediately impacted her physiology, which allowed her to then conserve her energy, right? And be more efficient. Is that accurate, Mary?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, very cool. So the bottom line, the so what for you guys, and really the now what is in terms of whether you're riding the flywheel or you're spiraling down in the doom loop, you control how you think and how you respond to every single situation, right? And ideally, when you're in the doom loop, shift to neutral thinking. When you're riding the flywheel, really feed yourself and make those deposits in your mental bank account with that positive thinking. And then sometimes if you're in the doom loop as well too, and you're behaving in a way that's not congruent with positive outcomes, then sometimes it's good to take a break if you can take a break, or recognize your physiological response and then do something like, for example, breathing, taking a break, restroom break, to be able to then remove yourself. But just by creating pause and then triggering that breath, you're connecting the conscious to subconscious, and then you're creating space to then, again, take the next best step forward. And there's a whole bunch of that more that goes into that, but that's really the so what here too. And this is all about self-awareness as you guys are building your own personal thermostat and the thermostat for your teams. So mental mastery, myself and Nate last, we really live this intersection on the athletic side, between parents, coaches, and athletes. We don't just work with athletes, we work with businesses. Obviously work with first responders. I work a lot with law enforcement right now through Sam Houston State University. We also work with military folks and veterans as well too. It's where Mary and I are part of Team Red, White, and Blue. They're a Veterans Health and Wellness organization, if you're interested in that, which I know that Sarah's a member of as well. We provide speaking, keynote speaking, just speaking to teams, workshops, team building events, one-on-one coaching, small group coaching. We provide valid and reliable psychological assessments that can help with assessment and selection, from everything from leaders to help HR professionals. And we also provide digital content, which hopefully in the near future will be with Volt as well too. Here's some examples of our clients that we've worked with in recent years. And again, here's some of the now what in terms of, really hitting our intentions and what to expect today too. So the bottom line is we want you to become more aware of your mental momentum and what's happening in between your ears in real time. We want you to ride the flywheel often, which is more possible when you control your A and B button, your attitudes and behaviors. That when you get in the doom loop, which we're going to inevitably do, how do you reverse that as soon as possible? And always coach yourself first from the inside out so you can win the war for the mental health, wellness, and fitness. Please contact us for a free consultation. Best way to be able to do that, if you want to take a screenshot of this, which we'll also send this out, including this recording. Our Kung Fu is probably the strongest on LinkedIn right now, and Instagram is probably the next best. So I have mine and Nate's as well too. You can follow me on Twitter. I also have a YouTube channel. And please reach out to us directly. That's our emails directly there too. And our website, we're a young company. as we're forming this joint venture, Mental Mastery, in partnership with Volt and others. Nate and I also wrote a book called Deliver Discomfort, along with a bunch of other great Americans. You can find it on Amazon or wherever you buy books, including an audiobook too. With that being said, thank you for everyone for joining us today. Thank you for everyone who's listening to this, who may be listening to the recording. Thank you, Volt, again, and hope that you guys gain something that can add value to you and your teams, so you can use momentum in your favor to ride the flywheel and avoid the doom loop.